Thank you. Morgan and Kim and Don, thank you for that. And then I have to say, I came out this morning and I saw choir robes laying across chairs. And I knew at some point some email had passed through that wasn't addressed to me, and it said something about choir robes, but my name wasn't in it, so I didn't really pay attention to it. Well, that was pretty cool. Thank you very much, Michael. And to the rest of the choir. I think I told you, you brought that song up a couple of weeks ago, and I said that that's one of my favorite clips in any movie ever. And one of my favorite parts is after the song, as the choir goes back and the Mother Superior is just screaming and yelling and ranting, and this docile old priest comes back and says, "That was cool." That was cool. Will you please pray with me? And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I want to read it to you again, Matthew 10, verses 40 through 42, and then add the kicker at the end, 11:1. Welcome, or whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. Now when Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and proclaim his message in the cities. Who's ever gotten ready for a trip? You know that a week ago, I had a business trip. I know that Janet travels all the time, so she knows how to prepare for a trip. Part of my preparing for a trip is staying up late the night before and making sure that I've packed everything, because I haven't packed anything until that night. And usually it involves Lori coming in and saying, "You're going to need this, and don't forget this." Who else is packed for a trip? What do you need when you pack for a trip? If you have a long trip, what do you need to pack? Underwear. Okay, you need to pack underwear. Although in my years of doing camp, I can't tell you how many times I've had to go to the store to buy underwear for some kid. Who else? What else do you need to pack for a trip?
Hair products.
Hair products, okay. Well, the hairdresser brought up hair products, outstanding.
And makeup.
And makeup, okay. I have never brought makeup, but I take hair products.
Phone charger.
Toothbrush, toothpaste, phone charger. Oh, yeah. You can't do it without a phone charger. And I love that most airports at least have plugs nearby. And some airplanes actually have USB ports. Awesome. Food? You gotta have food, don't you? Right, because you gotta have snacks. Because all they're gonna give you on the airplane is that little bitty packet of peanuts. And you can't very well stop at every convenience store you pass, although some you want to. Yeah, Cadence? Pardon? Clothes bag? Yes, you have to have a suitcase, right? You have to have a bag to put your clothes in. Jesse, did you have something you have to pack?
Like a surfboard?
A surfboard. That's awesome. Right, yeah, you can pack a surfboard. If you're going down south, why not pack a surfboard, right? Yes, we're all going to the beach with Jesse.
Money and credit cards.
Money and credit cards. It takes a lot to prepare for a trip, doesn't it? Especially a trip of any number of days. You can't just leave your house. I have to do laundry. I have to make sure that the clothes I want to wear, I can wear. I've made it places. I went on a trip in February. This is horrible. You know, we spent some time interviewing with other churches, not just you, although we picked you, then you picked us. That was wonderful. I had to catch an airplane to Lexington, Kentucky. I landed in Lexington, Kentucky. I got to my hotel room. I opened up my suitcase, and I forgot the clothes that I was going to wear to the dinner I was having with them that night. Luckily, I was right next door to a mall. Walked over. I still love the shirt that I bought there. We have to take time, right, and pack up clothes. That's not what Jesus tells the disciples. See, he's getting ready to send them on a business trip. He's saying, you're getting ready to go out of town. And you're going to go out of town, and you're going to tell people about me. And when you go, just go with what you have. That's all you need. You just need what you have on. You don't need an extra set of underwear. You don't need hair products. You certainly don't need a phone charger, although that might have been helpful. And the disciples, I can imagine, are looking at him like, what? And Jesus says, everything you need will be given to you on the journey through those you meet. It's a lesson in the church about what it means to be hospitable. Hospitality plays a major theme throughout the Bible. As a matter of fact, not showing hospitality leads to the destruction of entire cities in the Bible. Not welcoming people and feeding them and clothing them, according to Jesus, is what puts you on the wrong side. I can remember it was a different October 2001. Shortly after the September 11th bombings, and I had to go on a seminary class trip to Mexico. We went to Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, just across the border from Nogales, Arizona. And now the first night there, we stayed in this huge building, a dormitory, that had water that we could drink out of the faucets. But the next night, we stayed with people living in Nogales, Sonora. Now, if you ever go to Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, you'll see up on the hill there are these enormous mansions. We didn't live in mansions, we lived with people. And so all day on that second day, we toured maquiladoras, we toured the factories that they're working in. For the most part, all of the industry that's moved from the United States into Mexico. And that's what we toured while we were there. We looked around and we looked at the different places and we met the people. The one thing they all had in common was the supervisor was always American and usually lived up on the top of the hill. And then you would talk to the people who worked there, and the minimum wage, or the maximum wage, they're both about the same, was $5 a day. $5 a day for a 12-hour day and a 6-day week. So that night, after we'd seen this, and we're kind of depressed, we go and live with a family that might work in one of the maquiladoras. Not the family I went to. The family I went to, they had a little bit more money. And they had a concrete floor. Some of my friends slept on a dirt floor. And they didn't have an outhouse. They had a toilet, but you had to flush it with water by pouring water into the toilet. But it was just a woman and a small child by herself. And as we began to talk to her, the reason they had more money is because her husband was here. And had been for 2 years. She hadn't seen him in 2 years. And he was coming home that night. It was a story that I told Lori, and I still get a little misty-eyed about. So we stayed up, because she said, I don't know when he'll be here. I just know that he's coming. It depends on if the border guard that he's worked with is at the gate or not. Well, he was. And he shows up about 3 o'clock in the morning. And we're all wide awake because we're like, wow, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And we sat there, and he began to tell us his story in English. And he was telling us about how the first time he tried to go to the United States, he saved up $1,500, a year's wages, to get a coyote, to take him across the desert. And as they were going across the desert, people that he was with died. And he crossed over the border, and he got picked up, and he got sent back. And so he waited, and he saved money. And at that point, he got married, and he finally had the money, and he went back, and he came across the border again. And he got a job, washing dishes. One day, as he was washing dishes, a dish fell and broke, and he cut his hand. And he just had to keep washing dishes because he was afraid that if he went to the hospital, he'd get sent back. And he'd already spent 2 years' wages getting there. He's telling these stories about some of the treatment he's received. His wife just sat there quietly crying. And I can remember a student far wiser than I have ever even pretended to be asked the question, how can we help? What can we do to change this? He said, just be nicer. That's what he said. Don't treat us like we're horrible. Be kind. I read a blog this week and I posted it on Facebook, and several of you responded along the way. I love that. That's why I put those things out there. I read something and it speaks to me, and I want you to read it. And this was by one of my favorite authors, Will Willimon. And in it, he challenges the church to begin to do the work of the church. He says that at some point, we forgot what that is. We stopped doing it. He says churches are in the business of meaning making and meaning bestowing. And he quotes the book As One with Authority, where it says the church is there to help people reflect on and interpret their lives in light of God's purpose in Jesus Christ. And that's the one thing that churches do that no one else does. No other institution does those things. The premise is that in the search to be relevant, remember we talked about that a few weeks ago, in the search to be relevant, the church has given up the intellectual work of being the church. And we've relied too heavily on the things that touch our emotions. Not that emotions are bad, but emotions are temporary. We have a call to help us, me and you, together, living in our community, to think about the things that we hear, to tackle the difficult issues, to help make sense of the world around us, not just because of a good feeling, but because of what we're told and how we break that down. And some of that has become uncomfortable because it's no longer about affirming our lives. It's about calling us to new life, calling us to a new way of viewing the world. I laughed in that same article because there was a quote from somebody that said, it was a former church member that said, "At my church we get advice from the pulpit on how to have a happier marriage." Lori needs to give that advice, not me. She's the best one at that. How to have a purpose-driven life, how to vote. Sometimes it's good advice, but it's no different than what I've gotten from my daily Huffington Post. Why bother with all the church baggage when there's nothing said that fundamentally challenges who I am and where I'm headed? The call of the church is to help people reflect on and interpret their lives in light of God's purpose in Jesus Christ. And how can we reclaim that? The answer is here today. We go and we do. That's the model of adult learning that's most often used. Action, reflection. We go and we do. And then we learn. We go into the world. And as Friedrich Buechner says, we have it in us to be Christ to one another, to work miracles of love and healing as well as to have them worked upon us. We go and we do. And then we welcome those who are going and who are doing. It's not some kind of oversimplification of the gospel. That is the gospel. I heard a story once about a young priest. I'm sure that most of these stories are apocryphal in nature, but I heard this story about a young priest who went to an older priest and said, gosh, all these people, they come to the church and they want help. And I'm pretty certain that none of them are doing what they say they want to do. I mean, they come in and they want money for bills, and they want money for gas, and they want money for food. And I have no doubt that instead what they're going out and doing is things that I don't approve of, and I'm sure that this church doesn't approve of. And it gets exhausting trying to justify who I'm going to help and why. And the older priest sat back and he looked at the young priest. And then he said, what business is it of yours determining who gets help and who doesn't? Why exhaust yourself with that burden? You are a follower of Jesus Christ. Your task, therefore, is simply to share. Out of the wealth of God's abundance, your requirement is simply to love others as God loves you. Your job is simply to give. And where we have failed in the church is understanding that that's our job. And we've become consumers of things instead of givers and doers and goers. Perhaps what we need to do is offer a cold cup of water to the soldier who comes back, who served however many tours in Afghanistan, who suffers from depression and post-traumatic stress, and all he hears on the 24-hour news cycle is that people with PTSD are dangerous and aren't able to be in the workforce, and that's all they know. Perhaps we're called to give them a cold drink of water. Perhaps we're called to extend kindness to the teenager whose parents kicked her out of the house when she said she was gay because their church said that was a sin. Perhaps we're supposed to hear the man in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, and be nicer to the undocumented immigrants in our midst and not shout out things as we drive by. This week, pardon me, but it's been a hell of a week. From the things that we've seen at the University of Missouri reminding us that people still hurt people emotionally, to the things that we've seen as the week closed when we were reminded that people still hurt people physically. And that hate, whether it's in the form of racial epithets on a college campus or death and destruction thousands of miles away, is there in our world today. Perhaps by practicing hospitality, by being the church that not only does and goes to do, but welcomes those who are seeking a place to be. Perhaps then we can be ushered into this mutual space where all of us are the little ones receiving. All of us are loved equally by God, and each of us is crucial to God's world growing around us. That's the church that we've said we want to be. That's the church that we promised in front of this rock that we wanted to be. That's the church that we said we were going to grow and live into in this place. At the 2011 or 2013 General Assembly of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, it was in Orlando, Florida. I couldn't go because I had people at home who wouldn't have been happy if I went to Disney World. There was a sense of the assembly resolution called Becoming a People of Grace and Welcome to All. We've shortened that to just say all means all. And the gist of it is everyone is welcome. Everyone. Everyone. Whatever partitions we build among people, none of those matter because everyone is welcome. Here, at this table, in this place, to come to God, everyone is welcome. And I have to tell you, People have left the church because of that. Churches have left the denomination because of that. Because it's uncomfortable. It's the hard work of the church. It's the thing that we've forgotten how to do. So let us call ourselves to that. To doing the hard work. The emotional stuff is great. Let us do the intellectual work of understanding what holds us back and opening ourselves. Welcoming everyone is not a political statement. Welcoming everyone is not standing up and saying, I'm better than you. Welcoming everyone is following the gospel mandate to love. That's all it is. It's living out biblical hospitality. It's being the church that we have claimed and that we want to be.